morning for almost everybody. Welcome to Incubate Energy Lab's Lunch and Learn series featuring Datch, Consolidated Edison, and EPRI. Incubate Energy Labs is built for startups to engage EPRI and electric power utilities in paid demonstration projects. This is more of a utility summit and collaborative of demonstration projects throughout the U.S. and Canada and in South America. We will be entering the more international world. If you have any questions, please reach out to Amy Haas or Eric Steeb. I will put their emails in the chat in just a moment. This webcast is being recorded, and by participating in this call, you consent that your name, voice, and contributions will be included in our recorded materials. Phones and computers have been muted on entry. To unmute yourself, click on the microphone at the bottom of your screen. If you've dialed in, you will need to press *6 to unmute yourself on your phone. For best connectivity, we suggest that you join the WebEx first and then have the meeting call you. You can do that by going to the bottom of your screen where it says mute, unmute, click the down arrow, and it'll ask if you want to switch your audio. We would like to have a very interactive chat. Chat is going to be on the bottom of your screen on the right-hand side. Feel free to introduce yourself, ask questions, provide comments here in the chat, and I'm going to hand it over to Mark.
Hello. Just give me 1 second to get my screen up. Alrighty. Cool. So hi everyone. My name is Mark, and it's a pleasure to be presenting here today and sharing a little bit about what we do at Datch and how we're working with Con Ed to improve work management with their field teams. So to start with, I wanted to give a high-level overview on Datch before diving into our work with Con Ed. You know, organizations that are well run have a bit of a curse, and this is that the more diligent they are at capturing information and collecting that information, the less time they get to spend on hands-on value-add work. There was a study that came out by McKinsey a couple of years ago, and they found that, you know, across industry, that 22% of all hours worked was considered recoverable time spent on business processes. And really this is where voice comes in. So at Datch we use conversational, verbal conversations to help with these repetitive, compulsory, but really critical business processes. So what do I mean by processes here? What I mean is really anywhere there's a human involved, particularly out in the field or on site, and documentation is required. So we see a lot of applications across a lot of different processes and workflows, we see processes such as in the areas of maintenance, in operations, in safety or quality. A lot of it's centered around kind of general work management. So we see a lot of work around work order processes, so such as with Con Ed with work planning. But also, at the raising of work orders or the updating or closing out of work orders, we see a lot of areas, application areas around things like safety as well. So incident reporting, near miss reporting, hazard reporting, but also in areas like quality, inspections and audits and whatnot. So, I mean, really the sky's the limit. Basically, if there's a process that needs to be done, particularly when you're away from your desk, this is a really good place to bring in Datch and help to automate with those voice workflows. And then the last thing to mention here is that Datch, isn't here to replace your existing systems, but really, rather to be an interface to those systems. So, we often integrate into systems like SAP or IBM Maximo, but really it's, again, if there's an API endpoint available, we can generally talk to your systems. So I just wanted to jump into a couple of examples here of how Datch works. I think that's the easiest way to get across, how the functionality works and how it really simplifies these processes. There's a couple of different ways in which we think about the processes as well. So a couple of different frameworks that we apply. So the first of these is what we call a transactional process, and this is for processes where you've often got, it's very structured. You've got a bunch of fields you need to get filled out as quickly as possible, and you want to be able to just do that quickly, naturally, conversationally, and get it out of the way at the end of the job, 90% faster than you would, through other means. And then the other example is play-by-play. And play-by-play is really about, when you've got these much longer processes, they could be 30 minutes, they could be 3 hours, they could be all day. Essentially you want to be able to collect as much information as you can during those processes, and you want to be able to capture that information accurately. And so what Datch allows you to do is, instead of, reporting after the job or at the end of the day or at the end of sometimes the end of the week, trying to remember what you did in the job and detailing it, usually to a low quality standard. What Datch allows you to do is basically capture that knowledge in real time as that knowledge is being generated. And so it's really about, real time knowledge capture, sequence of events data capture that allows you to essentially get as much information as you need, but also high data quality as well. So really, we've got those kind of two key areas that we function in. One is kind of transactional data capture, and the other is play-by-play. And so this first one is an example of a transactional process. And I'm just going to hit play here.
Create a maintenance log for the line 3 spot welder. The job took 45 minutes and was completed yesterday by Ben.
Please describe the problem.
The robot is producing inconsistent spot welds.
Please describe the work that was carried out.
The TCP was off-center because of a collision, so I moved the neck back to the correct angle and verified everything was on location using the alignment tool.
Make a change or save.
Save.
Maintenance log created.
All right, so a few things going on there. So again, this is a transactional process. So the goal of this is to really knock this out as fast as possible and get back to the jobs that you're working on. Typically, something like this would be at least 5 minutes through the different methods of capturing that data, even if it's already a digital process. But what we could do is knock this out in about 30 seconds. As you can see at the top here, you've got, in that first kind of initiation phrase, you've got about 6 or 7 different intents, all within that one command. So, firstly, they say create a maintenance log, and firstly that narrows down the context, and Datch knows what information it needs to capture and what structure it needs. And then you've got things like the asset name, how long the job took, that it was completed, and when it was completed, and who completed it. And so it fills in most of that. And then if there's any fields left over, you can go through and talk through those as well. And you'll have noticed, that it's built to be able to communicate or capture certain jargon and certain acronyms as well. Probably the last piece of information here that's probably useful is Datch's ability to understand that jargon. So there are various ways in which we do this, but you'll see that they mention line 3 spot welder, but that actually has an asset number and asset ID. And so what Datch can do is, over time, it can adapt and learn, how what assets correspond to what names or colloquial names refer to specific asset IDs. And you can generalize this across a lot of different areas. So yeah, and then I'm going to jump across to this next example. So this shows a couple of different features. You'll see it's a different color. It's an earlier version of Datch, but it's very much about, there's advanced search capabilities, but it's also about play-by-play. So, and then also that ability to edit. So, sometimes you'll capture some information that's not, correct, or you want to remove it, or you want to edit it. And this just shows a bit of the practical functionality around that.
Search work orders.
Say the work order or filter.
Filter by work orders with the user status WOCO.
Say the work order or filter.
So I'll select the second work order here. Create history write. So I conducted the rotor speed calibration and noticed a vibration issue.
Got it, thanks.
The calibration readings were successful.
Got it, thanks.
Recommend a quarterly inspection be done by the maintenance team.
Got it, thanks.
So I notice here that there was a mistake in the first phrase. So I'm going to go in there and fix that. So this should be rotor speed. I could also play that back if I wanted to. Set user status to initiate.
User status set.
Export.
Right, so pretty straightforward. Sometimes finding assets can be a real pain, especially if you've got if you're working with a big enterprise company and you've got 100,000 assets to get through. It's very important to be able to not just be able to capture information quickly, but also to be able to naturally find that information so that you can write to it. That can take quite a long time if you're doing that. But really the thing to showcase here is that play-by-play functionality. So you kind of have to imagine the work walking through. They'll do one work on one piece, one part of the job, and then they'll quickly record a snippet of information. And as you can see, so these are what we call remarks. And in each of these remarks, these are self-contained, these are timestamped, so you get that all a sequence of events data. You can also take photos, which isn't demonstrated here. And then you can go through and if you make those edits, that's also training the system. So if you have certain jargon that you use with your plants, with your team, or with the company, as you continually make those edits, Datch will get smarter and smarter to your specific needs as well. And then just this last example here. So this is this is more around safety and hazard reporting, just to give you a different flavor. But again, imagine someone, I think it's a test rig they're looking at. Imagine this is a 20-minute job. Someone's doing a walk around. They're trying to figure out what needs to be noted as they continually go through that job.
Record an issue for the rear left brake rotor assembly.
Issue record assigned.
Set the issue.
What's the issue?
The test rig is overhanging on the platform and is a tripping hazard.
Got it.
The rig is also vibrating due to loose bolts.
Got it, thanks.
Set the action.
What is the action?
Recommend replacement of the rotor by next week.
Action added.
Also recommend a quarterly inspection be conducted by the maintenance team.
Got it.
Export.
Okay, great. So again, very straightforward. You can see that a job that typically would either require note taking or a lot of memory requirements, and then going back to a workstation to report in whatever detail is possible. This makes it very simple in the ability to just capture that knowledge in snippets as you're seeing those events. It's all time-stamped, and as you can see there, it's all structured as well. And then once that's done, it sends it straight to your databases, so your asset management systems or safety systems or ERPs or whatever it might be. And very, very straightforward. Really speeds up the process for anyone involved. So
search work.
Moving on. Okay, so yeah, the last item just before jumping across to the Con Ed use case, just wanted to provide an overview of how Datch's stack works. So very simple illustration here. They basically have these kind of three phases. So one is the kind of text speech to text element. So this is where you talk through that process, as you saw in that example. And then it's kind of identifying and structuring that. So that's the NLP, the natural language engine that's working there. So you can see there they talk through and name the what the process is, talk through the different elements of that process, and then Datch structures that data on the other side of that. And then the last part of that is the integration step. So that's where it routes that that information through to the right system. So that once the process is identified, it makes that it's very simple. It knows what it needs to capture, and then it knows where it needs to send it. And so what Datch really does is automate this end to end from natural language through to it being in your system, ready to do whatever you need to do with it. Because of the nature of that interface, there's also some cool things that we can do to remove things like double handling around multiple systems. So this is an example of an actual use case that we have with one of our mining customers, where they'll have a shift log, and the data that's captured in that shift log ends up needing to be repeated in their own databases, in another third-party database, as well as SAP. And so one of the neat things you can do is because of the nature of Datch as the interface, you can send information to multiple systems to even further simplify the workflow for the for those folks out on site. So now that we've covered what Datch does, it'll be great to talk through how we've applied it to the Con Edison use case. So to start with, we basically sat down with Con Ed and we looked at all the different areas we could apply Datch to. But importantly, it was useful to narrow down the scope to a single process, so that we could concentrate on doing it well, especially with the limited time that we had. Eventually, we settled on what's called a job planning process. So just to set the scene, basically Con Ed has a number of work planners whose jobs consist of going out to site, working through the work that needs to be carried out by the field technicians, and then noting down all the steps that need to be carried out for those jobs. These walkarounds can take many hours, sometimes all day, and currently this is done by noting down each step with paper and pen before heading back to a workstation to copy across all those notes, try and figure out exactly where they fit together, upload any photos that they took, structure the data, and then attach that work plan to a work order, which would then be carried out by the field technicians. The software they use is called Engage, which is provided by an excellent company called Endeavor. We quite enjoyed working with them, but this tends to sit on top of Maximo and allows utilities to build detailed workflows for their teams. The purpose for bringing Datch into these workflows was to really simplify the knowledge capture out on site, significantly speeding up those processes, and allow for detailed sequence of events data to be recorded in real time, in order to boost the data quality of the information coming through. And then it was also about really removing or reducing the need for all that post-processing and double handling that has to be painstakingly done on the other side. So let's say, for example, if a work planner is preparing a work order for, let's say, the replacement of a throwover switch, and there's multiple steps in that process, along with equipment lists and EHS requirements. The planner will go out to site, and as each element of this work order is identified, they simply need to mention this in real time, as if they were discussing it with a colleague. So then Datch takes each of those observations or remarks, structures the information into the right fields and in the right order, and then files any photos within that sequence as well. So all this is done in real time as they go through it. This then gets sent directly through to Engage, and then the planner can then move on to the next job. So super easy, rapid, and then, removing all the friction that used to go into that documentation piece. So I just wanted to provide some more detail on the step-by-step process required to make this work. So, firstly, after narrowing down the scope to the job planning process, Con Ed provided a walkthrough of how this is used in day-to-day operations with our customer success team. Asim is also on this call for any questions if we have any around that. This basically allowed our team to map the processes onto our conversational framework and then ensure that this application layer works smoothly. Things we have to consider here are things like the jargon, acronyms, so things like the work order numbers and asset numbers and whatnot, and then standard behavior patterns, so shortcuts or common phrases or whatever it might be. So this basically covers that first stage there, the identify and structure component. Once we had the process mapped out and built, the next stage was the integration stage. This was the primary focus of the pilot in terms of the time that we committed to it, and our goal was to enable Datch to call up the right information from Endeavour and allow the information captured through Datch to be sent through to Endeavour's databases. Then the next phase is the carrying out of user testing and process iteration where necessary. So lastly here, I want to kind of summarize how this all went and where do we go next. So firstly, we achieved the primary goals of the pilot, which were to build and demonstrate the job planning process on the app, and then also to build the connections into Endeavour's software with the integration so that we can we could have an end-to-end workflow completed. I'm happy to say that went relatively smoothly, although we needed a small extension to get us through to the release and production stage. There's a couple of things that slowed us down right towards the end, but I think we got over those hurdles before the final report at the end of the year. But yeah, when it comes to release, one important feature of how we work is that we try not to be tied down to simple delivery gates, but instead take in kind of an agile, iterative approach to this wherever possible. So the stage that we're currently at is with the project is one of those iterative stages where we've now put it in the hands of users to test out the functionality, and then we take that feedback to incorporate any additions or changes to that application layer. One example of this feedback is the use of templates. So this is a feature request that was brought up by one of the users during testing, where they wanted the ability to simplify the planning process through the use of standardized plan drafts for jobs that are commonly prepared in the same way. We identified this as a primary feature, and luckily this maps well with some of our existing functionality around draft states. So this is one of the items we're currently incorporating for phase 2, and upon release, we'll be going through another round of user testing with the team. If this is successful, the next step will then be to begin rolling out with the wider team. So really looking forward to that stage, and really happy to be continuing working with the Con Ed team post Incubate Energy. So yeah, just wanted to end the presentation by saying that we're very much open to replicating the successes we've seen with Con Ed with any of the utilities attending today. A good exercise here is to have a think about where voice could make an impact in your day-to-day operations, and then to think about that from the perspective of productivity, data quality, and simplifying the interface for frontline workers. We're working with a range of enterprises across the utilities, but also manufacturing and mining and aerospace sectors, and have a big list of use cases that we can draw from when needed. So examples of this include, working on field service reports with ABB Global's field service teams, work order fulfillment over at Contact Energy over in New Zealand, and then work management processes over at NIPA. So we've got a lot more use cases, but there's a few examples of kind of areas that we see where a lot of the processes overlap what we've seen in the utility space. Then just lastly, one potential way to get started with a solution is also through EPRI, and I think Jared's going to jump in a moment to discuss this. But feel free to contact me directly at any time if you'd like to talk about use cases, in your with your company. So yeah, thanks for listening. And I'll hand it over to Jared. I believe that's the next step, and then we'll jump over for questions.
All right, thanks, Mark. I'm pulling up the slide here, so it may be a little bit slow. But yeah, as Mark indicated, we had a successful project in Incubate Energy, and looking potential to expand that on with different use cases for utilities. And as we pull up this one slide, we do have a supplemental project that we've launched in the last couple of years. And this project is really looking at, we know that Datch is actually working in this space in our utility industry, as demonstrated in Incubate Energy, but also in other industries. So we want to be able to, take that and do a proof of concept with other use cases that are valuable to utilities. And it doesn't seem like I'm being able to pull this up. Angie, if you want to just pull up that one slide on your side, I'll go ahead and continue on speaking to it. The supplemental itself is actually a cross-sector supplemental, so it is looking not only at transmission and distribution, but also looking at substations, generation, and also safety and health type of applications or use cases. And so we want to be able to assess those kind of in a real-world environment, test out some of the common issues that you hear from utilities, the communications, the cybersecurity, actually integrating it into the system. Some of those can be maybe bigger challenges than what Datch has done with their product, and being able to integrate the steps for the use case and roll that out. But we're looking at this as a project that can allow the field workers, kind of that hands-free, touchless environment, to work in this kind of clean environment that we're all hoping to work within. But we think that this technology, the voice assistant type technology, actually accomplishes that. There's a number of different use cases, as we hopefully are seeing on the webcast. I've got several of those listed in the blue area with a worker working in a cabinet there. But they span, as I mentioned before, from transmission distribution up to maybe the generation space. And what's neat about this particular project is that even if you're a sole distribution utility and you don't have maybe generation assets, even the generation use cases where they're doing a walk around and logging information through a voice assistant, being able to do that, you can actually see how that applies to maybe doing an outage restoration type of use case, where you're actually logging in, walking around the pole or walking around the damage, logging that type of information. And what's neat about it, I think we've always had a challenge with keeping the outage management system data clean, and that's probably the case with these other use cases. But this actually gets to the heart of that. You're actually trying to clean up that data on the front end, as opposed to getting it logged and trying to clean it up on the back end. So that step-by-step process that Mark was mentioning with use of Datch in this case, being able to interface with the voice assistant, whether it's Datch or another one, you can have that back and forth. And if you're not logging something maybe correctly for that particular use case, you can see how you could have flags and clean it up on the front end, as opposed to trying to clean it up on the back end. So what we have planned for in this particular supplemental project is a lot of what we've done in the Incubate Energy, but maybe expanding that on to a larger scope. What we want to do within the supplemental is assess what the state of the industry is. We have some innovative technology providers like Datch that's doing some really cool things. Maybe in other industries, maybe we can pull that into our industry, do that proof of concept type of demonstration project, and then really look at, I think the one things or a few things that would be very beneficial to the utility is being able to assess the performance of that technology in these real world environments. And so testing the efficiency gains that you would have for the field worker, the safety improvements. And then, once we have that, then we can start looking at the cost benefit analysis of these voice assistants. And so within the supplemental project, we actually have 3 different participating levels. We have the observing participant that just is interested in the technology but may not want to demonstrate it, but want to see and have access to how other utilities are doing and some of the results there. There are some utilities that may want to demonstrate the technology, but not necessarily integrated in with their enterprise systems. And so that level there is $85,000 for this probably likely a 1 to 2 year project for each of these use cases after all is said and done. And then the final one is kind of an all-in approach where you're actually demonstrating this, but also integrating it into your enterprise systems. And so whether it's your asset management system, maybe your outage management system, or whichever system it is, that would be the top tier for this particular supplemental project. And just wanted to mention that today, that this is an opportunity to continue this line of research through the supplemental project. We've had great success with our Incubate Energy Labs project and with Con Edison and with Datch, and really would love to extend that on to different use cases within the industry. So if you have any questions about the supplemental project, feel free to contact me. I'm actually going to drop in a document that's related to the supplemental into the chat window, as well as a TI report that we had from a couple of years ago that kind of talks about all of this at a high level. So I tell you what, while we're before we go to Q&A, maybe I'll pass it over to Eric. I know he's been very involved in the Incubate Energy Labs project, and he can probably speak from a Consolidated Edison perspective on how the proof of concept went over the last, 6 to 9 months, and then maybe what he's looking for as he moves forward with the team there at Con Edison. So, Eric, I'm going to pass it over to you, and then we'll maybe take Q&A after that.
Jared, a quick introduction of myself. I'm the interim manager of the Innovation Hub at Con Edison, as shown here on the slide. What we primarily do is work with our colleagues across our companies to identify their challenges and then match them as appropriate with service providers externally. And we've been part of the Incubate Energy Labs program for 3 or 4 years now, I think, from the start, and continue to be pleased with our involvement in that. So through that, we were introduced to Datch, and really want to emphasize or re-emphasize the early successes of that effort through the Incubate Energy Labs program. Really, the lift, I know we know the importance and the difficulty around integrating software with big central utility IT and cyber programs, and that was a lot of the focus, along with the actual application development in parallel. So we got through those hurdles, and big kudos to the Datch team, both on the technical development of the application, but also the patience and expertise actually helping us get through that fully cybersecurity integration with multi-factor authentication, everything all good to go for a successful launch. And then the agility to expand, which we are doing in the next year or two through the supplemental. It's anticipated to adjust that use case a little bit, or the application, as Mark mentioned, to incorporate some of those the templates that the job planners like to use to make their lives a little bit easier instead of starting from scratch on every job. So we look forward to continuing on that work and kind of relaunching in the coming months here. But we're also excited for other use cases. We're already in conversations across our company about how this could be applied to other day-to-day jobs. If you just kind of sit back and think of, okay, what are consistent processes across the company where people are going around inspecting equipment or inspecting facilities, and then they have to enter that information somewhere. Almost any time that's the case, there's an opportunity to consider the Datch application. So we are excited to not only continue on the current path with the job planning function, but expand potentially to other opportunities, or at least explore them. And to the supplemental, we look forward to hearing from others in their use cases, because although there will be learnings and sharing of exactly the same use cases, there will be opportunities to share knowledge on other creative use cases too. So just wanted to provide my perspective. Happy to be working again with EPRI and Datch, and look forward to conversing with others, not only through the supplemental, but externally as well. I can drop my email in the chat if anyone wants to connect offline. Thanks.
Maybe we've had a really good presentation from Mark and input, I guess, from the EPRI side as well as the Consolidated Edison side. Let's open it up for questions or comments. Feel free to come off of mute and ask questions. I think Mark is ready for any questions or comments that you may have, or Eric and I would also love to chime in as well with the project that we just finished up in Incubate Energy Lab. So questions, comments from those on the call?
Hey, Mark, this is Annie Haas. I had a question about the integration aspect of it. You had listed several, enterprise partners you've worked with. Are there any that you found more workable than others in terms of the integration process itself?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. There's always a spectrum. So, it can depend on a number of factors. So, as you can imagine, systems that, where there's defense involved, there's a lot more hurdles to get through. If systems are more up to date, if, for example, if you're using S/4HANA for SAP, it makes integration a little bit easier. But yeah, it definitely helps if you have an IT like an ICT team that has experience with doing integrations. It definitely makes it simpler. We're currently we're continuing to build out our team as well to make sure that we have the right right resources, materials to really make the integration smooth. So it's not much of an answer if you say it depends, but it really does. And we're quite familiar now with systems like SAP and Maximo, and they're typically the hardest ones to work with. Once you go downstream to kind of the layer 2 systems, such as like Engage, like we did for the Con Edison project. You often get to work directly with those software providers themselves, and it really makes it much smoother because we can go directly with the people that built it as well. So yeah, different ways to kind of tackle it.
Cool. Thanks. I see a question from Dexter here about, is there a way to pilot the workflow without requiring a full integration into a utilities enterprise systems?
Yeah, we do have that option. That we have a stream called SPOC, which is basically a demonstration, or a short stands for short POC, and that's just essentially the ability to do that first stage of the identifying structure and move that integration piece to the next stage. So about 50% of the cases we do that with. Often when we work with the big utilities or the big companies, the integration is actually very much in everyone's interest to do it at the POC stage, because that's often the biggest hurdle to get over. But yeah, we do have that option, and usually it's successful, and we can do that quite quickly as well. So yeah, we have both options.
Mark, I think Dexter will appreciate this question as well. But I know within the utility space, we have a lot of terms that maybe slang terms that we have for assets and procedures and so forth. You know, I think from one utility that may call a transformer a can to, you know, to many other words. Can you speak a little bit to how the Datch system itself would adapt to those, and maybe even the, I guess, being from the South, I have a different way of speaking maybe than others here in the United States and around the world. So how do you account for maybe dialects and other things within your Datch platform?
Yeah. No, I definitely understand. I have a bit of a mixed accent myself. I'm from Australia and living in the UK and spending a lot of time in the US. It's definitely makes it a challenge for you know, some voice recognition software. But yeah. So firstly, the easy one to answer there is the accents. So we actually we have a growing list of accents that we support. But and most accents fine from out of the box, almost optimized out of the box. There's some feedback loops that help improve that over time as well. But yeah, we've had to deploy in the heart of rural Yorkshire in the UK, where even I can't understand who's speaking out to the US and New Zealand and Australia and whatnot as well. But yeah, in terms of jargon, which is actually a very interesting problem to solve, and one of the ways that we can differentiate, we differentiate ourselves as well. It's really, firstly, it's about pre-training the system with standardized jargon and industry acronyms. But what makes the problem so interesting is that every company has their own subset of acronyms and jargon, and even alphanumeric strings such as work order numbers or asset IDs, flocks in the SAP speak. But yeah, so what we do there is we have two ways to solve for this, and we're actually talking about a little bit about this on the Con Edison side as well. For the first option is doing some pre-training as well. If you have a big list of specific jargon or acronyms, we can preload that in and train it up on the front end. But most of the time what we do is it passively trains. It's passively training through feedback loops through the system. So if you for example, if you name an asset in a way that's never been named before, there's no way for the system to have known that. It'll say, I don't know what that is, or it'll might translate it to something else if it's in the free text fields. And those remarks that you saw in the second example, the fact you can tap into those and make edits to those, that's actually set up in a way that allows it to train the system to understand that jargon in the future. And so we can train it not just on a company level, but also down to the team level and down to the user level as well. So they can get quite specific around the way you talk, and then also adapt to things like the accent, or bordering on dialect sometimes of how you talk while you're out there as well. So yeah, definitely we have feedback loops all the way down, is a good way to put it.
Let's continue to pause here for other questions that may come in the chat window, or feel free to, again, for those that are participating, to come off of mute and ask your question. And while others may be thinking about questions, maybe this is a question for you, Mark, or maybe Seema, or even Eric. I guess from all of the proof of concepts or demonstrations that you've done, and knowing that we as a utility industry, we may have a whole host of different use cases that we could explore this type of technology, what would be the one key to success in actually rolling out and demonstrating this, whether it's useful or not useful for this particular use case? What has been the one thing that's made these type of projects successful? I know that we had a really successful project here with Eric and team there at Con Edison. So I'll just toss it out there for either of you guys to speak to that.
I mean, for me, and I'd love to hand this over to Asima as well, who often gets involved more on the day-to-day here. But one thing we like to focus on is, the boring stuff of of really good communication and good frameworks for that as well. So like having the right people in the right place. We think a lot about, how do we communicate? What do we need to communicate? When do we need to communicate? And if we get that same participation from the other side, usually we can knock these things out really quickly. And, this project with Con Ed has been quite, we managed to do this quite quickly in comparison to sometimes what we experience. And I think that came down to, good management by Eric and Asima on both our sides to make sure the right people were doing the right things at the right time. But I'm happy to hand it over to someone else who's also been involved. So either Asima or Eric, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, sure. Asima here, head of customer success at Datch. I would completely agree that a lot of it has to do with framework and having a really good project manager in place for both sides to drive the project forward. So Eric and Jared have been that for this project for us, and working with them has been great in terms of being able to rally around a project together and meet our goals and deadlines. The second piece I would say is also having a user base and a workforce that is looking to do their work in a more efficient way. We find that the more open a team is to change and just looking to work forward essentially and work with new technology, it just makes the project that much more rewarding and that much greater to see evolve and grow over time.
Or the 2 points I was going to cover.
We do have another question in the chat. Besides human edits, are there automated approaches to deal with homophones and words for like for, I, build?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good one. If we had one of our engineers in the call, I'm sure they'd love to to talk about this in more detail. But there are always anyone that's involved in the world of voice comes across what we call edge cases. So these little little thorns in our side to having that 100% perfect system. And and so there's a few ways to tackle this, and sometimes it's those feedback loops that you often see. But what we also provide, especially with our enterprise support. So we have like a premier support package, which basically allows people to, allows us to give the right attention and really help iron out these edge cases with our enterprise customers. That's what that's there for. And so sometimes we'll come across one where where it's very hard to tease out the context of a certain word. So like 4 and 4 are typically okay because the way the language models work, LSTM models is that you have context around the sentence. So the same way humans understand the context, this can understand it as well. But it's it gets a bit trickier when you've got you say when people will drop will drop the verbs or the nouns or the adjectives around their sentences and talk in in work jargon, and then on top of that they might say I want to we'll need to two X4734 components, and even then it might not be very clear to you what I've just said there, but they might mean the word TO, or they might actually mean two as part of that acronym. So when there's specific things like that, we can get those reported upwards, and we can actually accelerate the learning, so that especially if it's around regular, if there's regular jargon or phrases or whatever it might be, where that's involved, we can actually coerce that a little bit to help make that a much smoother experience as well. But yeah, it's a very interesting field to once you kind of dive into those kind of details.
We got another question online. Can you describe the options for the tool and any custom jargon DBS? Are there cloud options versus behind the utility firewall options, or both?
If I understand the question correctly, it's like basically there's like I said, there's two ways we handle this, and one is just fully automatic. So if there's custom jargon that that you're using, as far as the users are concerned, they don't even realize that custom jargon is being created and trained into the system. So all they're doing is making those corrections, and then Datch is building up that capability for that for those users. In terms of building those up, specifically, if you want to front load that, basically you just work directly with our team. So you'll provide a CSV with the list of utilities or the list of jargon, and then we'll push that on our end. So it's not a tool that you'll use. We might build that into a tool. If we get a greater volume of requests for that, we'll definitely look to build that into a customer side tool. But right now it's something that we can handle with our customer success and engineering team when there's requests for it. And then I think, just to read through the question as well, in terms of the cloud capabilities. So, obviously this is a cloud, primarily cloud-based. So we, always the smoothest solution if you've got a cloud system in place, cloud-hosted system in place. But often, especially in the utility world, we work with on-prem solutions as well. And our engineering team has very tried and true methodologies that they employ to allow for Datch to speak to those systems and do so in a secure, encrypted way that satisfies all the requirements.
Hey, Mark and Asima, one question that I think we've encountered over the many months we've been working together is, does this work in kind of loud environments, and what ability how do we get around noisy environments with this, and can we use headsets, and what are the safety considerations with the application?
Yeah, I can jump in, but feel free to elaborate as well, Asima, if you like. But yeah, pretty straightforward. It's just typically a question of hardware. So sometimes it's not a problem, especially if you've got if it's field workers out on transmission lines, it might be okay. If you're at the power generation facilities and you got 100 decibel turbines right next to your face, then it makes it a bit more tricky if you just want to use a phone microphone. But what we find is typically these environments require hearing protection, and so what we do is we recommend just off the shelf hearing protection with Bluetooth microphones. So I've literally got one right next to me on the desk here. So just a standard Class 5 hearing protection Honeywell headset off the shelf, and you can use a microphone to help with that communication. And what we often see is users end up using it for different forms of communication as well, such as talking with each other. So yeah, there's a bunch of ways to skin that cat, but typically it's just a question of making sure you've got the right hardware to support it.
I think, Angie, that's probably all the questions, or at least time that we have for the Q&A. Again, Mark, Seema, and the Datch team, as well as Eric and the Con Ed team. It was really a fun project to work on with you guys. One that I think we've all mentioned that was successful, but we're going to be continuing on to get additional learnings about that. So definitely looking forward to that and being able to report out even more lessons learned and successes in the near future. So I guess, Angie, I'll turn it back over to you to close us out.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Our next Lunch and Learn webcast will be Thursday, February the 17th from 1 to 2. An invitation should be coming out shortly. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to anybody on the Incubate Energy Labs team, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.